You don't belong here. The words cut through the air before Danielle Brooks even looked up. Heather Langford, senior flight attendant, perfect uniform, and a smile that never reached her eyes, kicked Danielle's Louis Vuitton suitcase aside. The thud echoed through gate C-23 at Chicago O'Hare International Airport. Danielle tightened her grip on her boarding pass. Her breath trembled, but her gaze stayed calm. I have every right to be here. I paid for this seat. She wouldn't shrink beneath someone else's arrogance. Heather tilted her head, voice dripping with mockery. Money doesn't buy class, sweetheart. Then she stepped closer, daring Danielle to push back. Around them, heads turned. A man shook his head. A woman whispered, "Drama before takeoff. Figures." No one intervened, just a circle of curious, judgmental faces, feeding on the tension. Danielle drew in a slow breath, eyes locked on Heather's. She didn't need to shout. Not yet, because in 3 minutes, everything at gate C-23 would flip upside down, and Heather Langford would wish she'd stayed silent. Danielle adjusted her sweater and stepped forward, retrieving her suitcase with quiet dignity. She didn't react to the stares, didn't acknowledge the whispers rippling through the crowd. Her movements were measured, controlled, the bearing of someone accustomed to being underestimated. She approached the gate counter, where Heather stood with 2 other flight attendants, both white, both watching her with thinly veiled skepticism. "Good evening," Danielle said, her voice warm despite the tension crackling in the air. She held up her phone, the boarding pass glowing on the screen. "I have seat 2A. Heather's eyes swept over her, lingering on the jeans, the simple sweater, the natural hair pulled back in a low bun. The flight attendant's expression shifted, something between doubt and disdain. She took the phone with exaggerated slowness, scanning the barcode as if it might be fraudulent. The seconds stretched. Other passengers in line shifted uncomfortably. "The system's showing an issue," Heather said finally, her tone flat. "You should go back to the ticket counter and verify this." It wasn't a suggestion. It was a dismissal wrapped in professional courtesy, the kind of microaggression Danielle had experienced countless times throughout her career. The implication hung heavy. You don't belong here. Behind Heather, the other 2 attendants, Jennifer, young and blonde, and Brad, tall with salt and pepper hair, exchanged knowing glances. A silent conversation played out between them, one that needed no words. "I'd be happy to wait here while you check," Danielle replied evenly. She made no move to leave the line. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, but she ignored it. Around her, the energy had shifted. A middle-aged black man, 2 people back, craned his neck to see what was happening. A white woman with 2 children watched with concern. The gate area, moments ago filled with routine pre-boarding chaos, now felt charged with unspoken tension. Heather's jaw tightened. She turned to Brad, her voice loud enough to carry. "Can you help me with this? There's a problem with her ticket." The emphasis on her was subtle but unmistakable. Danielle stood perfectly still, her expression neutral. But inside her mind was cataloging everything, the tone, the body language, the deliberate theater of it all. She'd built a career on reading rooms, understanding power dynamics, knowing exactly when someone was trying to put her in her place. This wasn't about a ticket. It never was. Danielle adjusted her sweater and stepped forward, retrieving her suitcase with quiet dignity. She didn't react to the stares, didn't acknowledge the whispers rippling through the crowd. Her movements were measured, controlled, the bearing of someone accustomed to being underestimated. She approached the gate counter where Heather stood with 2 other flight attendants, both white, both watching her with thinly veiled skepticism. "Good evening," Danielle said, her voice warm despite the tension crackling in the air. She held up her phone, the boarding pass glowing on the screen. "I have seat 2A. Heather's eyes swept over her, lingering on the jeans, the simple sweater, the natural hair pulled back in a low bun. The flight attendant's expression shifted, something between doubt and disdain. She took the phone with exaggerated slowness, scanning the barcode as if it might be fraudulent. The seconds stretched. Other passengers in line shifted uncomfortably. The scanner beeped, confirming the ticket's validity, but Heather frowned at the screen as though it had personally offended her. "The system's showing an issue," Heather said finally, her tone flat and dismissive. "You should go back to the ticket counter and verify this." It wasn't a suggestion. It was a dismissal wrapped in professional courtesy, the kind of microaggression Danielle had experienced countless times throughout her career. The implication hung heavy in the recycled airport air. "You don't belong here." Behind Heather, the other two attendants, Jennifer, young and blonde with a nervous energy, and Brad, tall with salt and pepper hair and an air of practiced authority, exchanged knowing glances. A silent conversation played out between them, one that needed no words. Jennifer's lips curved into a smirk. Brad crossed his arms, positioning himself as backup. "I'd be happy to wait here while you check," Danielle replied evenly, her voice steady as bedrock. She made no move to leave the line, no indication she would comply with the veiled command. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, but she ignored it. Around her, the energy had shifted palpably. A middle-aged black man in a business suit 2 people back craned his neck to see what was happening, his brow furrowed. A white woman with 2 children watched with growing concern, whispering something to her daughter. The gate area, moments ago filled with routine pre-boarding chaos, now felt charged with unspoken tension, as if everyone sensed they were witnessing something significant. Heather's jaw tightened, a muscle twitching beneath her foundation. She turned to Brad, her voice loud enough to carry across the waiting area. "Can you help me with this? There's a problem with her ticket." The emphasis on her was subtle but unmistakable, a verbal underline that drew a clear distinction. Brad nodded slowly, moving around the counter with deliberate casualness, as if this were routine rather than targeted. Danielle stood perfectly still, her expression neutral, but inside her mind was cataloging everything: the tone, the body language, the deliberate theater of it all. She'd built a 30-year career on reading rooms, understanding power dynamics, knowing exactly when someone was trying to put her in her place. She'd faced boardrooms full of men who'd tried to diminish her. She'd navigated corporate politics that would have crushed lesser leaders. This wasn't about a ticket. It never was. This was about power, perception, and the persistent belief that certain spaces belonged to certain people. And Danielle Brooks knew exactly how this would end. Brad approached, taking Danielle's phone and studying the boarding pass with theatrical scrutiny. His eyes moved from screen to face and back. When he spoke, his voice carried patronizing authority. "Ma'am, how did you purchase this ticket?" The question was an accusation. Passengers behind Danielle stopped talking. She met his gaze steadily. "With my personal credit card, through the airline's website. Is there a problem?" Brad's smile hardened. "We need to verify. Security protocols, fraudulent tickets, stolen cards, we see it often." He paused deliberately. "Did someone gift you this? Did someone else make the purchase?" The insult was naked now. The assumption that a black woman in jeans couldn't afford first class hung thick in the air. Behind Brad, Heather nodded, arms crossed. Jennifer watched with interest. "No one gifted it," Danielle said, steel entering her voice. "I bought it myself. If there's a technical issue, I'll provide verification. But I'm not sure why I'm the only passenger being questioned." She'd named it. The effect was immediate. The black man in the business suit stepped closer in solidarity. The mother with children raised her phone, recording. Passengers murmured, some uncomfortable, others nodding agreement. Brad's jaw clenched. "We have every right to verify tickets. Standard protocol." "Is it?" Danielle asked quietly. "I've watched people board for 15 minutes. No one else has been stopped." The challenge was clear. Brad and Heather exchanged glances. They were losing control. The performance was being witnessed, recorded. Heather grabbed the desk phone. "I need to call my supervisor. We have to ensure everything is in order before boarding." Danielle pulled out her phone, fingers moving efficiently. She sent a message. No one could see to whom, then lowered it. Her eyes swept the gate area, taking in the American Airlines branding, the corporate promises. She knew every policy they claimed to follow. Brad noticed the text. Unease flickered across his face. "Ma'am, step aside. You're holding up the line." Danielle didn't move. She stood firm, waiting. Phones were out now. People were watching. And somewhere in the airport's offices, her message had been received. The clock was ticking. Heather's phone call was brief and performative. When she hung up, her expression shifted from defensive to emboldened. She turned to Danielle, voice deliberately loud enough for everyone to hear. "Ma'am, we've encountered situations like this before. Fraudulent purchases, unauthorized card use. Until we can verify the legitimacy of your ticket, we cannot allow you to board. Airport security has been notified and will conduct a thorough investigation." The words landed like public accusations. Fraudulent, unauthorized, investigation. Each term carefully chosen, painting Danielle not as a passenger, but as a potential criminal. Around the gate, reactions varied sharply. Some looked away uncomfortably. Others stared with judgment forming. A few pulled belongings closer as if proximity might taint them. But others recognized what was happening immediately. Marcus, the black man in the business suit, shook his head with weary familiarity. He'd seen this before. Sarah, the white mother, whispered to her daughter while keeping her phone raised, still recording. They knew this script. Danielle felt the full weight, not just the accusation, but centuries of assumptions behind it. The presumption that success and her skin color were incompatible, that her presence here required extraordinary justification. She'd spent 30 years breaking barriers, shattering ceilings, proving herself in rooms that didn't want her. And here she was again, treated like a suspect rather than a customer. But she didn't raise her voice or demand managers. Instead, she straightened, radiating quiet dignity. "I'd like the full names of everyone involved in this process, for my records." Heather blinked, caught off guard. "I don't see why that's—" "Because I'm being publicly accused of fraud," Danielle said evenly, cutting through the noise with precision. "If security is being called, if an investigation is opening against me, I have the right to document who initiated it and why. Your full name, please. And yours." She looked at Brad, then Jennifer. Something in her tone, not anger but cold, focused purpose, made them hesitate. Heather's mouth opened, closed. "Heather Langford," she finally said, voice tight. "Brad Morrison," Brad added reluctantly. Jennifer stayed silent, fascinated by her tablet. Danielle photographed their badges with deliberate visibility. The camera shutter clicked loud in the tense air. She opened her email, typing quickly. No one could see the recipients, but the message was clear. This was being documented, escalated. "You can't just—" Heather started, alarm creeping in. "I can," Danielle interrupted firmly. "Your badges are visible in public. I'm documenting what appears to be racial discrimination. That's within my legal rights." She hit send. The whoosh echoed. A notification appeared. "Sent to legal department." A second message went simultaneously to another address, unseen by anyone watching. Danielle pocketed her phone and waited, expression revealing nothing. 2 airport security officers arrived within minutes, both white men in their 40s, expressions neutral but body language suggesting they'd been briefed on Heather's version. They approached with cautious distance. "Ma'am, we need you to come with us," the taller one said. His tag read, Peterson. We have questions about your ticket purchase. Am I being detained? Danielle asked calmly. Peterson and his partner exchanged glances, not expecting the question. We need to verify information. That's not an answer. Am I detained under suspicion of a crime, or am I free to remain here? They seemed unprepared for someone who knew their rights so precisely. Peterson's jaw worked. We're asking you to cooperate with routine security. Danielle nodded deliberately. I'm willing to cooperate, but I'm being singled out for screening no other passenger received, despite valid documentation. I want that on record for all these witnesses. Noted, Peterson said tersely. Now step over here. These procedures, Danielle said, voice measured but edged, making passengers lean closer, seem designed to target a specific demographic. But I wonder, do you actually know who you're dealing with? The question hung heavy, laden with meaning everyone could feel. Heather frowned, confused. Brad looked bewildered. The security officers paused. Something in Danielle's absolute certainty making them hesitate. The gate had fallen into electric silence. Marcus filmed openly. Sarah repositioned for the best angle. Passengers crowded forward, boarding forgotten. No one knew it then, but the next 3 minutes would change everything. Messages Danielle sent were being read in executive offices above. Phones were ringing urgently. Senior executives were being pulled from meetings. Emergency protocols were activating. And at gate C-23, the woman they'd treated as a suspect stood quiet and unbowed, waiting with perfect patience for the storm she'd summoned to arrive. The two security officers moved closer, their presence transforming the gate area into something resembling an interrogation zone. Peterson gestured toward a corner near the windows, away from the boarding line. Ma'am, if you'll just step over here, we can handle this quickly and get you on your way. But Danielle didn't move. I'd prefer to remain here, where there are witnesses. Unless you're formally detaining me, I have the right to stay in this public area. Peterson's expression tightened. His partner, whose badge read Williams, pulled out a tablet. We need to see your ID, credit card used for purchase, and any other documentation related to this ticket. Danielle produced her driver's license and credit card with calm efficiency, handing them over. Williams photographed both, his movements deliberate and slow, as if hoping to find some discrepancy in the process itself. He compared the name on the license to something on his tablet, then to the credit card, then back again. The theatrical scrutiny was designed to communicate suspicion, to make her feel like a subject under investigation rather than a passenger with rights. Danielle Brooks, Williams read aloud, as if testing the name for authenticity. And you're traveling alone today? No one purchased this ticket on your behalf? No corporate account or travel agency involved? The questions kept coming, each one layered with insinuation. Where did she work? What was the nature of her business in her destination city? Had anyone else had access to her credit card recently? The interrogation had nothing to do with verifying a ticket and everything to do with finding some angle, some thread they could pull to justify what Heather had started. Danielle answered each question precisely, offering no more information than required. Her voice remained level, professional, giving them nothing to latch on to. But inside, she could feel the familiar burn of injustice, the knowledge that her whiteness would have made all of this unnecessary, that her credentials and her ticket should have been enough, that she was being put through this gauntlet simply because someone had decided she didn't look like she belonged in first class. Marcus had seen enough. He stepped forward, his voice cutting through the tense atmosphere. Excuse me, but I need to ask. Why is she the only passenger being subjected to this? I've been standing here watching people board for 20 minutes, and nobody else has been stopped or questioned. Peterson turned, his expression hardening. Sir, this doesn't concern you. Please step back. It concerns all of us, Marcus said, his voice rising slightly. He gestured toward the other passengers. This is racial profiling, plain and simple. You're treating her like a criminal because of the color of her skin. A ripple of reaction moved through the crowd. Some passengers nodded in agreement. Others looked uncomfortable, shuffling their feet. Heather's face flushed red. That is absolutely not what's happening here. We have legitimate security concerns. Security concerns? Sarah stepped forward now, her phone still recording, her 2 children watching wide-eyed behind her. I boarded 5 minutes ago with my kids. Nobody asked me a single question about my ticket. Nobody demanded to see my credit card or asked where I work. The only difference between me and her is that I'm white and she's black. Brad moved to intercept, his hands raised in a placating gesture. Ma'am, please. You're disrupting the boarding process. If you continue to interfere, we'll have to ask security to remove you as well. Remove me? Sarah's voice cracked with indignation. For pointing out discrimination, for calling out what everyone here can clearly see. Other passengers began voicing their opinions, the gate area erupting into a cacophony of competing voices. An elderly white man in an expensive suit shook his head dismissively. Let them do their job. If she has nothing to hide, this should be quick. But a young Asian woman in business attire countered, This isn't about hiding anything. This is about being treated with basic respect and dignity. Look at how they're treating her compared to everyone else. The atmosphere was fracturing, polarizing. Phones were out everywhere now, multiple people filming from different angles. The confrontation that had started as a private humiliation was becoming a public spectacle, and Heather and Brad were visibly losing control of the narrative they'd tried to construct. That's when Janet Kowalski arrived, heels clicking sharply against the terminal floor. She was a woman in her mid-50s with a severe haircut and an expression of practiced authority. As the senior manager for this terminal section, Janet had a reputation for running things with an iron fist and for backing her employees, right or wrong. She swept into the scene with the confidence of someone accustomed to being the final word. After a brief, whispered conversation with Heather and Brad, she turned to face Danielle, and her entire demeanor radiated dismissive power. Ma'am, I'm Janet Kowalski, Senior Operations Manager for this terminal. Her voice was clipped, businesslike, designed to brook no argument. I've reviewed the situation, and my staff has acted entirely within established protocol. We have the right, and frankly the obligation, to verify any ticket that raises red flags in our system. Now you have 2 options. You can cooperate fully with this security review, which may take some time, or you can proceed to the ticket counter to exchange your seat for one in economy, where verification requirements are less stringent. Alternatively, you're free to leave the airport entirely. The ultimatum was delivered with cool precision, each word carefully chosen to assert dominance. The underlying message was clear: submit to humiliation or leave. Janet's eyes held no warmth, no empathy, no recognition that perhaps, just perhaps, something deeply wrong was happening here. Danielle met her gaze steadily. I'd like to speak with your supervisor. Janet's smile was thin and utterly without humor. I am the supervisor here, ma'am. I'm the highest authority in this terminal section. Whatever needs to be resolved, it goes through me. Then you should know, Danielle said quietly, that what you're doing right now constitutes clear discrimination. You're creating barriers to service that apply only to me, based on no evidence of wrongdoing. That violates both company policy and federal law. Janet's expression didn't change. What I'm doing is ensuring security and preventing fraud. Now, are you going to comply, or do I need to have you escorted from the premises? Danielle could feel the moment crystallizing around her. Every eye in the gate area was locked on this confrontation. Marcus looked ready to physically intervene if needed. Sarah was still filming, her face flushed with anger on Danielle's behalf. The crowd had swelled. People from neighboring gates had wandered over, drawn by the commotion. The boarding process had ground to a complete halt. And then Danielle did something that made Janet, Heather, and Brad exchange confused glances. She pulled out her phone, not urgently, not frantically, but with absolute calm, and made a call. She held the device to her ear, her voice dropping low enough that nearby passengers had to strain to hear, her words indistinct. She wasn't yelling or making demands. She was simply speaking quietly to someone on the other end, her tone measured and professional. Janet watched with growing irritation. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to end that call and—" "Just a moment," Danielle said, holding up one finger. She listened to whoever was on the other end, nodded once, and said something else that no one could quite catch. Then she lowered the phone and looked directly at Janet. "Help is on the way." The words were simple, but something in how she said them, the absolute certainty, the quiet confidence, sent a chill through the space. Janet's eyes narrowed. "Are you threatening me?" "Not at all," Danielle said. "I'm simply letting you know that this situation is being addressed." Marcus caught the shift in energy. He turned to the crowd, his voice ringing out. "Everyone who has a phone, document this. Live stream it. This woman is being discriminated against, and we need a record of everything that's happening here." The response was immediate. Dozens of phones rose, screens glowing, cameras capturing every angle. Someone shouted that they were streaming live to Facebook. Another called out that they'd tagged the airline's official account on Twitter. The gate area had transformed into an impromptu media circus, and Janet Kowalski, who'd arrived expecting to quickly shut down a minor disturbance, suddenly found herself at the center of a viral moment in the making. "Everyone needs to calm down and disperse." Janet's voice had lost its cool edge, taking on a sharp note of alarm. "This is a security area, and if you don't comply with crew instructions, you'll all be removed from the flight." But the crowd wasn't intimidating easily. They'd seen something fundamentally wrong, and many of them were determined to see it through. The gate area had become something else now, not just a waiting zone for a flight, but a battleground for dignity, a referendum on how people deserve to be treated regardless of their skin color. High above them, in the labyrinthine offices that controlled O'Hare's operations, phones were indeed ringing. Messages were being read with increasing alarm, and decisions were being made with urgent speed. The machinery Danielle had set in motion was beginning to turn, massive and inexorable. At gate C-23, Danielle Brooks stood perfectly still amid the chaos, her expression serene, waiting. She'd been underestimated before. She'd faced rooms full of executives who'd doubted her, boards who'd questioned her qualifications, competitors who'd assumed she'd fail. She'd learned long ago that power isn't always about who shouts loudest. Sometimes it's about who knows how to wait, who understands exactly when the tide is about to turn. And right now, watching Janet Kowalski's confidence begin to crack at the edges, watching Heather and Brad exchange increasingly nervous glances, Danielle knew the tide was turning. The chaos had reached its peak. Janet was on her radio, voice sharp. "I need security at gate C-23 immediately. We have a passenger refusing to comply. Prepare to remove her from the terminal." The threat hung heavy. Arrest, removal, ultimate humiliation. Passengers gasped. Marcus moved closer to Danielle, a physical barrier. Sarah's hands shook as she kept recording. Then the PA system crackled to life. "Attention passengers on American Airlines Flight 2891. We apologize for the boarding delay. We are addressing an urgent operational matter. Please remain in the gate area." Janet froze. That announcement hadn't come from her. Someone higher up had just intervened. Her radio crackled. Then her personal cell phone rang. She glanced at the screen and went completely white. Executive offices, top floor. Her hand trembled as she answered. "Yes, this is Kowalski." Pause. Her eyes widened. "Yes, sir. I'm handling a—" Longer pause. Horror dawned across her face. Yes." Right away. She lowered the phone slowly, turned to Danielle. The authority had evaporated, replaced by fear. "Ms. Brooks," Janet's voice shook. "I wasn't informed. I didn't know—" Heather stepped forward, still not understanding. "Janet, what's going on? We followed protocol." "Be quiet," Janet hissed, eyes locked on Danielle. The crowd sensed the shift, everyone leaning in, confused. Danielle reached into her pocket, opened an app on her phone. The screen glowed as she navigated to a page requiring executive credentials. She turned it toward Janet. "CEO Dashboard, Danielle Brooks, Executive Access American Airlines." The words floated between them, impossible yet undeniable. Janet stared, mouth opening soundlessly. Heather stumbled backward, hand flying to her mouth. Brad went rigid, face draining. "Oh my God," someone whispered. "Wait, she's the CEO?" Marcus laughed sharply, incredulous. "You've got to be kidding me." Absolute silence followed. Every person processing the same impossible truth. The woman they'd kicked, accused of fraud, threatened with arrest, she was Danielle Brooks, CEO of American Airlines. The most powerful person in the company. David Morrison appeared, running full speed, tie askew, sweat on his forehead. When he reached the gate and saw the scene, the crowd, the phones, Danielle at the center, he looked sick. "Miss Brooks," he gasped, "I cannot apologize enough. This is unacceptable. I got your message and came immediately." Danielle raised a hand, silencing him gently. Her voice carried to every corner. "David, this isn't about apologies to me. This is about ensuring every passenger, regardless of race, regardless of dress, regardless of whether they're CEO or student, is treated with equal dignity." The words landed with devastating precision. A woman near the windows started clapping. Others joined. Marcus grinned, shaking his head in amazement. Sarah recorded again, tears streaming. "That's right! If they treat their CEO like this, imagine regular black folks." The applause swelled. Vindication, justice, the universe correcting itself. Danielle didn't smile. She turned to Heather, Brad, Janet, 3 people watching the ground crumble beneath them. Heather's lips moved soundlessly. Brad had hands clasped behind his head, staring at the ceiling. Janet stood shattered, understanding she'd destroyed her career publicly, permanently. Danielle scanned the faces, not just the employees, but the passengers who'd witnessed everything. When she spoke, her voice carried lifetime of navigating unwelcoming spaces. This moment is exactly why change is necessary. Not because I was affected, but because this happens every day to people without power to fight back. People treated like criminals because of skin color. Questioned, searched, humiliated, never receiving apologies because no one believes them. Complete silence. People listening to something that mattered. That changes today, Danielle continued, voice strengthening. Because every person who boards our planes deserves to be seen as human first, not judged by prejudice. David nodded, pulling out his phone. "Emergency executive meeting? Immediate changes?" "Yes," Danielle agreed. "But first, we address what happened here, right now, in front of these witnesses." She faced the 3 employees fully, every inch the CEO. Not through revenge, but through moral clarity of knowing exactly who she was and what she stood for. The reckoning had arrived. David straightened, expression shifting to grimly professional. He faced Janet, Heather, and Brad. 3 people who'd wielded authority with casual cruelty, now frozen under scrutiny. "Miss Kowalski, Mr. Morrison, Miss Langford," David said, voice carrying with formal precision. "Effective immediately, you are suspended. I need your badges and company property. Security will escort you out." Heather's face crumpled. "Wait. No, please. I was following procedures." "Procedures?" David's voice cut like ice. No procedure authorizes racial profiling. No protocol permits treating passengers with the disrespect you displayed. Your actions violated company policy and federal anti-discrimination law. Brad whispered, "We didn't know who she was." "And that," Danielle said quietly, silencing him, "is precisely the point. You treated me this way because you thought I was powerless. But every passenger deserves the same respect, regardless of title. That's not courtesy for executives. It's a basic human right." Janet opened her mouth, but no words came. The woman who'd arrived with commanding authority now looked diminished, crushed by her choices. David typed on his phone. "HR has been notified. This is termination with cause, effective immediately. No severance, no recommendation. Your employment ends here, today." The finality echoed. Passengers nodded approvingly. Marcus called out, "Good! That's right!" Sarah wiped tears, holding her children close. Peterson, one of the security officers, stepped forward hesitantly. "Miss Brooks, we were told there was a security issue. We should have questioned it. I apologize." Danielle studied him, then nodded. "Your apology is noted." Every person in authority has responsibility to recognize when they're being used as instruments of discrimination. Remember this moment. Airport security arrived to escort the terminated employees. Heather turned back, tears streaming, perhaps finally understanding what she'd done. Brad walked head down. Janet maintained dignity, but her hands trembled, surrendering her badge. David addressed the gathered passengers. "On behalf of American Airlines, I offer sincere public apology, not just to Ms. Brooks, but to every passenger who witnessed this. What happened doesn't represent our values. Within 24 hours, we'll issue a formal statement and announce new equity initiatives, mandatory anti-bias training, anonymous reporting systems, and a diversity task force. We're committed to systemic change." Danielle's phone buzzed continuously. The video was already viral. Marcus's live stream shared thousands of times. Sarah's recording picked up by news outlets. Hashtags trending. Respect in the skies. AA accountability. Within hours, Gate C-23 would be national news. The documentation was irrefutable, and the woman at the center wasn't some nameless passenger whose story would be dismissed. She was the CEO, and her voice would be heard. The PA crackled. "We are now ready to resume boarding for Flight 2891 to LaGuardia. First-class passengers may board." Danielle picked up her Louis Vuitton carry-on, the bag Heather had kicked 40 minutes ago, and walked toward the gate. The crowd parted, many offering quiet support. Marcus shook her hand firmly. Sarah hugged her, whispering, "Thank you for not backing down." As she boarded, the gate area still buzzed with energy, passengers crafting stories about witnessing a CEO take down discrimination in real time. Inside the plane, flight crew stood at attention, faces hiding profound mortification. Danielle settled into seat 2A, placed her bag overhead, and sat with a quiet sigh. She was exhausted, not from the confrontation, but from what it represented. 30 years of these battles, of being questioned and underestimated. But this moment had been witnessed, documented, amplified, and that mattered. 3 days later, Danielle stood at a podium in American Airlines headquarters, Fort Worth. Journalists filled the room. Employees watched nationwide via live stream. "I want to address what happened at O'Hare," she began, voice steady, "and what it represents for countless travelers facing discrimination daily." She paused, letting the weight settle. "What you saw wasn't isolated. It was systemic bias existing everywhere. The difference? I had power to fight back. Most don't." Her eyes swept the room. "I'm a CEO with resources and influence. Even with that, I was treated like a criminal because of my skin. Imagine the college student flying home, the grandmother visiting grandchildren, people without executive dashboards or VPs who come running, people stopped, humiliated, told it's protocol." Her voice carried measured passion. That's why this matters. Not what happened to me, but what happens to everyone. Every passenger deserves to be seen as human first, not judged by assumptions, not made to prove they belong. She spoke from the heart. Today, I'm announcing the Equal Skies Initiative, mandatory bias training, anonymous reporting systems, diversified hiring, independent oversight. But beyond policies, we need cultural change. Every employee must recognize dignity isn't negotiable. Respect isn't earned through titles. It's baseline for treating every human being. A reporter asked about overreaction. Danielle's eyes sharpened. Listen to thousands sharing stories since this went viral. Black passengers pulled aside at 10 times the rate. Muslim travelers interrogated. Hispanic families asked for citizenship proof domestically. This isn't overreaction, it's overdue. She leaned forward, voice softening but strong. Change begins when we stop making excuses, when we ask, why are things this way, and how do we fix them? When we stop protecting harmful systems and build ones serving everyone. That's the necessary work. As the conference concluded, Danielle remained at the podium. She thought about people watching, those who'd experienced discrimination, stayed silent, fought back and been dismissed. Young black girls understanding their dignity was worth fighting for. She thought about real change, not just policies, but transformation of systems, hearts, minds, a long road ahead. But having turned profound injustice into catalyst for something larger, Danielle felt what she hadn't allowed at Gate C-23. The story of Gate C-23 rippled outward, touching lives unexpectedly. Within weeks, I Stand With Passengers flooded social media, thousands sharing discrimination experiences, creating an undeniable archive of everyday injustice. Other airlines scrambled to announce equity initiatives. Industries watched, recognizing what happened at O'Hare could happen anywhere. Marcus started a nonprofit combating racial profiling. Sarah educated her community about allyship, actively opposing injustice, not just witnessing it. 6 months later, Danielle received a letter from Jasmine, a college sophomore. Facing workplace discrimination, accused of stealing for being the only black employee, Jasmine documented everything and stood her ground. The manager was fired. She kept her job. "I kept thinking about you at that gate," Jasmine wrote. "You didn't yell. You demanded to be treated like a human being. You showed me dignity is power. My voice matters. Thank you." Now, reading this, you have a choice. See it as someone else's story. Or recognize yourself. Times you witnessed injustice and stayed silent when speaking felt risky. Here's truth. Every time you witness discrimination and do nothing, you perpetuate it. Silence chooses comfort over courage. So what can you do? If you see unfair treatment, speak up. Say, "This isn't right." Record if safe. Offer to be a witness. Let people know they're not alone. Share stories reminding people change is possible. Tag companies when they fail. Support businesses prioritizing equity. Challenge your biases. Listen when people share experiences, especially when uncomfortable. Be Marcus, who spoke when silence was easier. Be Sarah, who refused to let injustice happen without consequence. Stand between cruelty and its target. The world changes through ordinary people choosing what's right. Next time you see someone treated as less than human, remember Gate C-23. You have power. Your voice matters. Silence is a choice. So is courage. Stand up. Speak out. Record truth. Support the vulnerable. Demand better from systems serving us all. If Danielle could stand at that gate facing humiliation with quiet dignity, knowing the world would watch, you can find your voice too. Your moment is coming. Will you be ready? Because dignity has no color, and justice has no exceptions.